With Daedalus recently added to the Rivals 2 roster, and the biggest major in Rivals of Aether history quickly approaching, it feels like the entire Platfighter community will either be at or watching Genesis X2, where the best Rivals of Aether player in the world will be crowned. Before Genesis begins, I've put together this quick viewing guide for you at home to learn about some of the best players in attendance, their history before becoming top Rivals 2 players, and their results so far in this new game. Of the nearly 500 attendees competing in Rivals 2 singles at Genesis, there are a few standout names who I consider true contenders for the gold medal. I'll be covering my picks for the 5 best players entering Genesis X2 in this video, and then I'll quickly go over some honorable mentions and other names to watch out for in the Genesis bracket. Most of you don't need an introduction to the king of Rivals of Aether and one of the best Rivals 2 players on the planet, but CakeAssault deserves one anyway. Cake is the undisputed best player of all time for the first Rivals title, holding the game's #1 ranking for 5 of its 8 competitive seasons with his signature force flip. In addition to dominating the Rivals scene, CakeAssault's no slouch at other Plat fighters. From his 5th place finish in Melee doubles at the Big House 11, to winning the first ever NASB 2 major at Heatwave 6, we all knew Cake was going to be a monster in this game, and we were right. Over the course of 2024, CakeAssault became one of the most prolific top players in the game, appearing at 15 different majors and winning 10 of them outright. He dominated events like Supernova, Heatwave 7, and Don't Park on the Grass with his fleet, even winning LACS Rivals without dropping a single game. But that was only the beginning. The prodigal son returned home in late 2024, picking up Forsburn once again and sweeping his last few majors with ease. CakeAssault's fours tore through Stango in a brutal 6-0 to win Platfight, won Tri-State Regional Tap 7 over Switch without dropping a game, and started 2025 with a bang by winning Luminosity Makes Big Moves over the best players the East Coast had to offer with relative ease. Throughout his 15 offline majors so far, only 2 players have taken more than a single set against him, Boyko and Marlin. Boyko won't be attending Genesis X2, so everyone will be watching Marlin to see if he can finally stop the Cake sweep, or if CakeAssault is en route to claim yet another Genesis title. When Rivals 2 first came out, everyone had their eyes on the best players in the world from each Plat fighter to stake their claims in this new game. Some people correctly guessed that PM players, long overshadowed by more popular and legal titles, might finally break into the spotlight through Rivals 2. But none of them predicted Ion. Ion was a casual Project M and Rivals 1 player until 2022, when he entered his first NorCal P+ local on a whim. 6 months later, he attended his first out-of-region major, and made his first major top 8, immediately solidifying himself as one of the best Knuckles players in the game, and a titan even among one of the strongest PM scenes in the world. Even with that rapid ascent within the PM scene, Ion took the world by storm at Genesis X. Despite having never played Rivals 2 before that weekend, he instantly became a hometown hero by making a monstrous run to 3rd place at the game's first major, taking down the likes of Leffen, Lucius, Sparks21, and Lloyd Bagel. Ever since, the scene's new favorite Crag has been on top of the world. He won 3 online majors in 2024, from Rivals Recess 4 during the online beta weekends, to his 2 Coinbox victories after the game's release, beating the likes of Luck, Soul Rifle, Envy, Stango, and Void. But Ion isn't just a netplay warrior. After qualifying for LACS Rivals through one of his Coinbox wins, he secured a 4th place finish at the Stacked Invitational, after taking down Plup and utterly crushing Leffen's soul. Coming into Genesis as a top seed this time around will be a new experience for Ion, but his incredible results so far might be only the beginning of his journey as a top Rivals 2 player. If anyone is somehow the favorite to win Genesis X2, and also a complete wildcard for the tournament, it's Marlin. A longtime top Rivals of Aether player under his old tag, Kusi, Marlin's Ori rocketed to the top of the Rivals scene during the era of online majors in 2020, and he never quite left. After a few years at the top with Ori, Marlin switched to Raster in 2023, and cemented himself as one of the best in the world with 2 dominant victories over CakeAssault at Riptide 2023, to finally claim his long-awaited offline major and solidify himself as a top 3 player. That raster switch turned out to be a great pick, as Marlin kept piloting the bird throughout the release of Rivals 2, with a 2nd place finish at Genesis X after wading through an onslaught of crags and knocking CakeAssault out of winners before being eliminated by ZeeBee. He immediately avenged that loss at Genesis X, taking down ZeeBee along with Switch and CakeAssault again on his way to a 1st place finish, which he repeated at Riptide with a flawless victory over CakeAssault, Boyko, ZeeBee, and Rangunshu. In between these sporadic appearances, Marlin also dominated online events like the Champion and Beta Invitational and multiple coin boxes, continuing to farm top players like Boyko, Cake, and ZeeBee. With all these wins, and a secondary Arcane starting to cover some of his tough matchups on Raster, Marlin was looking like the clear best player in the world for most of 2024. But he received a 3-month suspension from competition from Aether Studios, which overlapped with the game's full release, and Cake switched to Forsburn. As a result, while Marlin is entering Genesis X2 with a positive offline record on basically everyone in attendance, including Cake, it's anyone's guess how he'll stand up against the same Forsburn that dominated Rivals 1 for so long. Marlin's suspension recently ended, and he won Frosty Faustings 2025 over Rymo and BioBurb with no games dropped. But the best player for most of 2024 still has a lot to prove if he wants to retake his crown at Genesis X2. I'm pretty sure Stango has been around since the dawn of the platform fighter genre, but he's certainly been in peak form over these last few years. Originally a top melee Marth, Stango focused primarily on Project Plus for a few years during and after the COVID pandemic, peaking at 4th in the world in 2022, before switching his focus to becoming the best NASB 2 player, and immediately taking home the gold for that game at Genesis X. For years now, Stango has been known as one of the best platform fighter players on the planet, no matter which game he's focusing on, and Rivals 2 is just his newest conquest. While Stango hasn't entered a ton of offline majors so far, he's put up consistently great showings across the East Coast, including silver medals at both Supernova and Platfight after bowing out to Cake and Grands. In fact, with dominant records over ZeeBee, Switch, Soul Rifle, and other East Coast talent, Stango's only real stumbling blocks offline have been CakeAssault and Boyko, who account for a whopping 7 of his 8 losses at majors from 2024. When we consider that Boyko won't even be at Genesis, and that Stango is one of the only people to take multiple sets over Marlin on his way to winning online brackets like the Rivals Varsity Tryouts and the Squawk Invitational, the best Zetter in the world seems poised to claim yet another gold medal from the Genesis series if he can finally crack the brick wall that is CakeAssault. And last, but certainly not least, let's talk about last year's Rivals 2 Genesis champion, ZeeBee. In a tournament stacked with crags from top to bottom, it was no surprise when the best crag from Rivals 1 and a top 5 player for much of the last several years came out on top at the game's first major tournament. With his newly buffed Beetle, ZeeBee absolutely obliterated the competition at Genesis X, 3-0ing both Marlin and Ion on his way to first place in front of a crowd losing their minds for every stock he robbed at low percent.
Crag! Oh, bro, he's still.
ZeeBee hasn't been able to capture another national title since that first performance at Genesis X, but that doesn't mean he's been absent from major top 8s in the meantime. He placed second at a ton of the game's biggest majors, including Gommel X, Heatwave 7, and LACS Rivals, with wins over almost every top player in the scene. He was the only player in 2024 to beat both CakeAssault and Marlin in the same bracket, and he's a consistent gatekeeper to strong players like Squanto, Mystery Soul, and even Ion throughout 2024. ZeeBee's results started to dip a little bit in the back half of 2024, with losses to Stango and Switch beginning to plague his brackets, and a 9th place finish at Platfight 2024 after losing to Shiv in pools. But he's still easily one of the best players in the world, even on his worst days. What's more, ZeeBee was originally a Crag and Edelus co-main in Rivals 1, so the return of Edelus in January might be just what he needs to recapture the magic of his last Genesis run. The players I've highlighted so far have stood out from the field as the best Rivals of Aether 2 players in the world since the game first took the stage at Genesis X. But of the over 400 competitors entering the most stacked major of the year, there are a ton of top players from all scenes who could stake their claim to fame at Genesis X2. Here are just a few other players that you should keep an eye out for in the Genesis bracket. Soul Rifle 211, last year's Rivals of Aether champion at Genesis X, and a top-level Rivals 2 Forsberg who placed 3rd at Platfight 2024. Asashi, a Platfighter aficionado whose stylish Claren sent CakeAssault to losers at Riptide 2024 in a stunning upset last year. Bbats, a top melee peach in Rivals Fleet who had a ton of incredible online results in 2024, including wins over Marlin, Switch, Rangunshu, Soul Rifle, and Asashi. And Pikmon, a longtime top Project M player who dominated the early beta tester brackets and placed top 8 at both Heatwave 7 and Don't Perk on the Grass this year, picking up wins on Evil Nardwar, Keeb, and Y with his Forsburn. And that's all for today's video. I'm super excited to watch the Rivals 2 bracket at Genesis X2, and I hope this video helps anyone new to the community catch up on some of the major players and storylines going into the event. Don't forget to check out the bracket itself at the link on screen, and tune in on the weekend of February 14th to watch the next Genesis champion be crowned.